Even with a careful prompt and a clean structured output format, a model will sometimes hand you something broken. A field goes missing. A value doesn't match what you expected. The JSON doesn't even pass. Maybe worst of all, the model gives you a confident answer that's just wrong. A reliable workflow never assumes the output is perfect. It validates every single response and has a plan for what to do when that validation fails. That's what this lesson is about, building the safety net so one bad output doesn't quietly break everything downstream. The golden rule is simple: never feed an unvalidated output into the next step of your pipeline. Validation works best in layers, starting cheap and mechanical, then getting more expensive and more semantic. You stop as soon as one layer fails. The first layer is syntax. For JSON, does it even pass? This is the cheapest check, and it catches the most common failures. The second layer is schema. Are all the required fields present? Do they have the right types? And do categorical fields only use values you actually allowed? Think about a field like priority. If the model returns something like super urgent, the JSON might be perfectly valid, but it still fails schema validation because that value was never on your allowed list. The third layer is constraints. Do the values obey your actual business rules? A date that's in the past when it should be in the future. A total that doesn't match the sum of the line items. A summary that blows past your word limit. These are rules specific to your use case, not generic JSON rules. The fourth and hardest layer is semantics. Is the content actually correct and grounded in what you gave the model? This usually needs a human or an LLM acting as a judge, because output can be syntactically perfect and still be a total hallucination. Most automations handle the first three layers with simple rules and save the fourth for high-stakes outputs only. So validation just failed. Now what? You've got several moves, and which one you pick depends on the stakes and the cost. Retry as is just runs the same prompt again. Models are non-deterministic, so this often works for a one-off glitch. And it's cheap, but you should cap how many times you try. Retry-with-Error is more powerful. You feed the failed output and the exact validation error back to the model and ask it to fix it. For low-stakes fields, you can fall back to a safe default like other or null instead of failing the whole record. For high-stakes cases that keep failing, escalate to a person. And sometimes the right move is simply to reject the record, log it, and add it to your eval set. Retry-with-Error is the single most useful recovery technique for structured output, so it's worth seeing in detail. Picture a support ticket the model just labeled. It set priority to super urgent, which isn't an allowed value. It left out the required sentiment field entirely, and it misspelled summary as SUMMRY. Instead of just rerunning the original prompt and hoping, you write a new prompt that shows the model its previous output, lists every validation error in plain terms, and asks for a corrected JSON object that fixes each one and still matches the original schema. Because the model can see exactly what went wrong, the corrected output is usually right on the very first retry. That precision is what makes this technique so reliable. The worst kind of failure is a silent one, where the model invents a plausible-looking value instead of admitting it doesn't know, and your validation passes because the value looks fine on the surface. You can design against this directly. First, require an explicit unknown. Tell the model to return null or unknown when it can't determine a value from the input, rather than guessing, so your validation can flag too many unknowns. Second, ask for a confidence or grounding field, something like a confidence rating of high or low, or a short source quote pointing to the exact text the answer came from. Third, separate extraction from inference, and have the model mark anything it had to infer rather than read directly. Inferred values are exactly where hallucinations like to hide. Here's how all of this fits into one production-grade workflow. First, you run the prompt with a precise schema. Second, you validate syntax, then schema, then constraints, and semantics if the output is high stakes. Third, on failure, you retry with the error, up to a small capped number of attempts. Fourth, if it's still failing, you either fall back to a default for low-stakes fields or escalate to a human for high-stakes ones. Fifth, you log every failure and feed the recurring ones back into your eval set and your prompt. This loop is what makes AI output dependable enough to actually build on. The model itself doesn't have to be perfect. Your validation and recovery is what makes the whole system reliable. Let's lock in the core ideas. Never feed an unvalidated output into your next step. Always validate at the boundary. Validate in layers, syntax, schema, constraints, then semantics, and stop at the first failure. When something fails, recover with a retry with error, a safe default, or a human escalation, and always cap your retries. Retry with error, where you show the model exactly what went wrong, is your most reliable fix for structured output problems. And design your prompts to fail loudly from the start, with explicit unknowns, confidence signals, and source quotes. Want to practice this yourself? Head to this lesson on freeacademy.ai and use the interactive prompt playground right there on the page, or paste the retry with error prompt into ChatGPT or Claude and watch it fix a broken JSON object in real time.